I think the Johnson County Memorial is great because Iowa City, for one, does not have one in Iowa City proper. And it represents all the veterans that served during World War II, Korea, World War I, all the conflicts we've been in. But the idea of putting it there at the Armory was because of the fact that it was built in 1937 as the first permanent home for the Iowa Guard in Iowa City. They'd always rented spaces prior. And they moved in 1937 and built it at a cost of $60,000. So they had I Troop of the 113th Cav and G Company of the 136th Medical Unit were the two occupants of that new armory. They were inducted into World War II in January and February of 1941 and served the whole length of the war. And the 113th I Troop turned in their horses, got scout cars, got light tanks, and they become a recon unit and went in Normandy on D-Day on Utah Beach, and they went clear across northern France and were one of the Iowa City boys or some that met the Russians on the Elbe in 1945 in May. And the G Company was part of the 34th Division's Medical Battalion, and they served, they went to Camp Claiborne, Louisiana for their initial training after they were mobilized, and then they went to Fort Dix, and from Fort Dix they went to Ireland and Scotland first. And in November of 1942, they were part of Operation Torch that landed in the shores of North Africa, at Oran and Algiers. And they were part of the group that was in the Battle of Kasserine Pass when Rommel made a huge attack on our Second Corps there. And it was a pretty bad showing for the United States part because Rommel really went through us. But one of our Iowa City soldiers again was a staff sergeant by the name of Eddie Edwards, who received one of the earliest battlefield commissions by leading 600 men to safety out of that pass and away from harm's way. So it was really a remarkable thing that he did. And after the war, he became a businessman here in Iowa City, and he passed away in 1962. But the recon outfit lost 6 Iowa City or Johnson County area soldiers in the battles across northern France, Leroy Weeks being the first one. And he passed away outside of St. Lo. Was killed by German fire, and VFW there on Highway 6 down in Iowa City is named after him. So a lot of people don't know who Leroy Weeks were, but that's exactly who he was. And he'd been a Guard member for several years before they were mobilized. So the Armory, after the war, they came back, and the Armory was reconstituted, and they had a 34th Recon to bring back the 113th lineage again, and it was there for a short while. The Medical Battalion became situated there as the headquarters, the 109th. And in 1955, the A Company of the Engineers, 224th Engineers, was located in Iowa City, and the Recon went away due to a reorganization. So that happened for several years, and then pretty soon the Engineers company went away, and it became a detachment. And then the detachment moved to Cedar Rapids, and a signal detachment was located there. The medics have always stayed, and the reason for the medics being here in Iowa City and in that armory was because of the medical facilities that we have at the University of Iowa hospitals. And of course, the VA was built in '52, and we had a lot of medical expertise there. So it was a huge center to attract members to belong to a medical unit. And through the years, it remained pretty much in that configuration until I took command of a brigade here in Iowa in 1 October 1979. And in traveling, I had units in 52 armories all over the state of Iowa. And the western part of our state was really diminishing in population, and small towns reflected the school districts, and trying to get recruitment. After Vietnam, our recruitment really went south. We were running a lot of units with less than half strength. And in fact, that brigade I picked up was 49% of their authorized strength level. My goal was to get everybody up to strength, because I knew someday we were going to have to go to war again. So we did that. We moved some units from western Iowa to eastern Iowa. And the first we moved some infantry units here into Iowa City. And then we started moving units into Waterloo, into Cedar Rapids, Davenport, and so on and so forth, in order to go where the populations in that state of Iowa were. and that way we could train up, we could get to authorized strength. So if the balloon ever did go up again, we had a complement of full strength, and we could go and really serve the country like we're authorized to do. So that was kind of units that went through this Iowa City Armory. And then while I was still a brigade commander, we tried to get funds to build a new armory. And that was slow in coming, and we actually had authorization to do that, and Desert Storm came along, and that kind of slowed our funding up. And after Desert Storm, we went through a spell where things were still online to build, and then we introduced into 2001 happened, and we were into Afghanistan and Iraq, and of course our funds were all diverted to go elsewhere. So the plans were still on hold, but they were effective yet, and sooner or later we knew it was going to happen. And we did get it to fruition, and unfortunately the flood of 2008 really pretty much swamped that armory, and we had to move again to rental facilities, which they'd done for years and years previously. And when the money came through, we built out there on Melrose, where the new armory is currently located. But I guess one of my reasons to want to save that thing, on the front of the old armory, when they built it, they put the crest of the infantry, or the cavalry, which was crossed sabers, and then the other side of the doorway they had a large crest about 3 feet in diameter of the medical unit. And I wanted those saved because they were really unique. You could go all over the country and you would never see those kind of things in an armory. And so when we went to the supervisors and I worked with them and we tried to make the deal on the armory, I said, one thing I'd like to do is save those. And Supervisor Pat Harney totally agreed with me that we could save them, and we come up with the idea maybe we could make a memorial or something to keep that site alive as to what it was at one point in time. So that's a long story, but that's kind of the story of that armory and some of the units that went through there. They mobilized out of that unit to go to Desert Storm. The 209th Medics mobilized out of there, and we took the 109th, and that again when we went into Iraq in 2004. So there's been a lot of activity that's gone through that building. So that's kind of the significance that I see, and maybe made it a little long, but that's kind of a short history of that building.